So can we put and under the terms of, can we just change the wording of it? So it goes 113 social housing units at 5 complexes are in the, and then put quote marks around residential red zone, and then will be, and under the terms of the cost share agreement, or cost sharing agreement, I think it's called, will be transferred to the Crown at no cost. Is that correct? Well, it's at no.
It still has to come off our bottom line, though.
Yes, I know it does, but I actually think that this is an amount, and I raised this before, that doesn't show up in the whole of the financial situation of the social housing portfolio, is the fact that a whole stack of properties that were within that portfolio generating a return to the council have suddenly been sold for no return to the council at all.
Do we know the actual value of those 113
Well, I
properties?
think we're going to get that.
At the moment, it's sort of estimated between $15 and $18 million impact on council in terms of an asset value. We obviously don't get the rental return as well, but from an asset value, off the book value of our assets, about $15 million.
So what report are we getting details on that for?
There's a piece of work being done around the impact of some of the Crown decisions, SERA decisions on council. And so this is one of those matters.
Excellent. Thank you. I've got David next.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I'm just a little concerned that we get an agenda paper, we have an extraordinary meeting put upon us, and then during a tea break we get another variation of the statement of proposal put in front of us.
Only the first page.
Well, this morning. Okay. Well, even if it was discussed.
No, it was as a result of this morning's meeting. The first page had a couple of minor amendments made to it.
All right.
Yeah. I mean, it's not the staff's fault. It's an enthusiastic council contribution to the collective effort. Would that be fair enough? No?
To be fair, it does change the nature of it quite considerably. The additions in there. The additions point the report into a completely new direction, so it's quite substantial.
Well,
but that's all good.
We'll be clear on that. Well, let's sort that out in a minute. Let's sort that out after we've finished asking questions around, because people have got questions, and we'll just get the questions sorted, and then we can have a discussion about how we deal with that, because obviously there are a couple of different views around that. Jimmy?
Questions. First one, if we review original document page 31, a new document on page 6, 9.7. So the current council social housing portfolio is $343 million. Am I right? 9.7.
The current rateable value.
The current, okay.
That's correct.
Yes. Okay. Then if we can you please confirm with the councillors whether the 49% share is equal to the current council, the rateable value, $343 million? 49% share.
100% is $343 million. So
yes.
Depending what we transferred into the entity, whether it be land and or buildings or however that worked, our value would be different.
So you mean the $343 million times 49%? That's a 49%.
No. That is 100% of the council's asset in social housing.
Yes.
Yeah.
But how about the 49% share?
If we had 49% investment in a company, then our shares would be 49% of the $343 million. So half.
Yeah.
Okay.
As an investment.
Yeah. The second question is
if we transferred the whole of the asset.
Yes.
But there is no decision made about transferring the whole of the asset yet. So that's one of the things we're consulting on, is how much we would transfer.
Okay. Second question is the attachment 1. If we review the option 1 and the option 3 in here, can you confirm with us if council leases the social housing land and the building to the list CHP, it means council share is 0, am I right? But if we review option 3, if council sold out all the building land to this new entity, CHP, then council own the share is 49%. I don't know this logic, you know.
All the options are 49% ownership by council. Under option 1, which is leasing the land and buildings, we would lease it at a land value cost. So council would be receiving about $8.6 million a year in lease rental, yes, under option 1, and a similar amount from memory. So option 3 is around selling, yes, and so we would have an investment as opposed to an income stream from option 1.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Paul?
Had there been any thought, prior going to all this here, had there been any thought about perhaps approaching Housing New Zealand to purchase our housing stock to continue that service?
So no, not serious consideration.
If I may, wouldn't that be covered in 2A if we sold everything to a housing provider? Housing New Zealand is a housing provider, isn't it? So effectively that is an option.
Yes, it's still an option that's on the table.
Raf?
Yeah, I mean, if I was doing this, the first question I would have asked is to Housing New Zealand. Can you take this off our hands? That would have been, since they actually provide this on behalf of the taxpayer anyway. I think the issue is, clearly this proposal has been changed since this morning, and I'd like to go back to the original one, but really the simple question is that the current social housing model doesn't work anymore, and the question is, what should we do with it? Staff have identified 20 options. They've been working on this for the last 18 months. We're just going out to ratepayers and saying, what do you think we should do? It's as simple as that. So why are we making it so difficult?
Yeah. Anyway, the issue is the change to the language of the objective clause. So do we want to have a discussion around that? So perhaps, Vicky, if you could lead off on that, and then there will be others who want to contribute.
So there is somewhat more to it than just the simple issue of housing and what we do with it, although that is fundamental. Within the Housing Accord, the first part of which we decided to get on with last meeting in terms of Wells and Colombo Street, this is the second part, and it's about improving the supply and quality of social or affordable housing, because if we go down the current track, then we are not, what we have is completely unsustainable. At the moment, our housing assets, the land and the buildings, are listed, as you can see in 3.16, as strategic assets. So in order to do anything about that, we are required to consult. We can't, for example, even rebuild on our existing land by way of a public-private partnership where we get the same number of houses back, but perhaps transfer some of the land under our current rules. So we have... Without going through a public consultation. We can't do anything without going through a public consultation. And the situation that we have is that our housing account, which has always been ring-fenced from rating, has an annual operating shortfall of about 3 million. We have at the moment about 1.8 million left in it. So there is a short-term horizon that we are required to focus on in order to do anything. We also have a serious housing problem in Christchurch, and the whole point of the Housing Accord and all of the discussions since February of this year about that was actually to try to do something about the housing crisis that we have in Christchurch. It wasn't about getting rid of social housing and getting out of it. That is totally contrary to both the spirit of the Housing Accord, which we have yet to sign, and to the entire debate that has been around this from February this year. So this is actually about making sure that people in Christchurch have a good, warm, dry house to live in. And since the Christchurch City Council is the second largest landlord in the country, we absolutely have to be socially responsible about the way in which we deal with that. These are people's lives that we're talking about, just in the same way as when we were dealing with flooding, those people were vulnerable. These people are equally vulnerable, if not more so, actually. So we have to be very clear about what we are going out to do. And it is not, repeat, not in any way, shape or form about going out and selling our social housing portfolio to the private sector. I am absolutely clear about that, and that's why we wanted the objectives made clear in that. We have been offered an opportunity. I agree that the government policy is kind of unusual, but we have been offered a way in which we can actually keep offering social housing to those who need it, but do so such that the government subsidises their rent by making up to a market rent. And that's really, really important, because that's potentially 10, 12, 14, 15 million a year that we will receive through this mechanism that we will not receive under any other mechanism. Hence the preference for the council becoming part of a community housing provider. The other thing that we've been offered that is quite different than any other local authority is the ability to lease our social housing into that entity, such that we receive the market rent, not from the tenant, but from the government, but that we still own that asset. In order to speed up the delivery of our rebuild on our social housing units, we have about 17 blocks that require rebuild. Even if we get everything we've asked for from the insurance, we do not have enough money to do that. So hence the need for some creative and innovative solutions, probably public-private partnerships, in terms of allowing people to build the amount of houses that we need on our land, and in return they might get some of the land. Or to even possibly swap land, because we have some in areas that will be incredibly expensive to rebuild on, given the damage that is on those sites. So this allows us to go forward in a way which actually houses people in Christchurch, stimulates the private sector, because we're going to have to work very, very closely with them in order to achieve these outcomes. It enables us to actually meet the objectives of the Housing Accord, and it enables us to get on and do some things both in the entity and with the Christchurch City Council itself. When we want to rebuild, whether it's Borum Street or Andrews Crescent or whatever, if we're doing that on a partnership basis, which may be any one of a variety of partnership type things, we cannot currently do it. So we are stuck at the moment with a rapidly diminishing fund in a situation where social housing, possibly because we're giving away huge amounts in the red zone, does not pay its way. We have to change the way in which we're doing. I am not in the slightest suggesting that the council gets rid of its obligation to house the most vulnerable in the community. That is in no way, shape or form the objective of this exercise. And while I appreciate that we are open for every possible consideration, and that's the nature of local democracy, that is not the objective that we're going out here with. The objective is that we actually have a sustainable social housing program, and that we can actually house people in the community through doing it smarter or differently than the way that we're currently doing it, because we've simply run out of time and money in the current way of doing it. Glenn.
Thank you. I'll be quicker than last time and punchier. Look, I just want to say that I'm quite relaxed that we're going out with the presumption that we are still in the provision of social housing. This is our current, this is our status quo position. And as with a draft annual plan, we go out with a certain position, as we did, for instance, over the retention of community grants. So I'm quite relaxed about that. We are also, with that, putting out 19 other options. The way I see it, this is an opportunity for social housing, which I think it is important for us to take. The preferred option will ensure our provision of social housing is viable, that the fund that supports it is sustainable. While we must look at all options, the preferred option will ensure that ownership is retained by lease. And this is very important. This is a value actually that the city holds dear, that it owns its social housing. This goes back decades, and I would be very intrigued that a council would seek to get out of social housing in the decade following earthquakes. What we offer our tenants is something that is a point of difference to many other landlords, in the sense that we provide security of tenure. And that's something we have to consider. We must remember our tenants in this. At the end of it all, it's about the provision of warm and dry housing, as Vicky was saying. Restructuring it like this will enable us to attract the income-related rent subsidy as an entity registered as a community housing provider. I think it's a good housing plan. I also think it's a sound financial plan. I've said this before, a measure of society is its priority for the poor. We've been in the provision of social housing for decades. I said last week also, the Crown's a signatory to the Human Rights Charter on housing. This is a basic fundamental right, and my view anyway is that we must make good on this fundamental right. I'm happy for this to go out for consultation as it is.
Very good. Paul?
Look, obviously, as we've seen in the report, this is not a viable option as it currently stands going forward. And I'm really comfortable to go out to the public and ask them what they feel they want to see happen with their social housing. It is ring-fenced at the moment. It's not going to stay that way for very long. So I think it's important we do it soon, do it quickly, find out what the public think, and we'll act on that.
Right, sorry, I was just adding the word amended statement of proposal, because we have amended it now with the reference to 5.4 in the residential red zone. So, all right, I'll put the motion. Oh, sorry. Jamie, Ref, Phil. Sorry? Well, then you have to, sorry, you have to move an amendment that okay, so you replace so Ref Manji, Jamie Goff have moved and seconded that the objective clause in the draft statement of proposal be returned to the one that was in the original agenda, in the original agenda. Sorry, there's a few other people that would do, so do either of you want to speak to that? Already done? Yeah, you can, yep. And then I've got Phil, so.
Okay, obviously we've got the moved and seconded that we stick with the original objectives that we got in the agenda. Between well, this morning there were a couple of additions in there, and my view is why I'm supporting the amendment is simply because I believe it fundamentally changes the intent or the ability to have an intelligent conversation with the community. The points read, ensure that the portfolio, this is the additions and the one that we then had on our desk this morning, ensure that the portfolio has a financially viable and sustainable future and maintain the capacity to provide the current number of social housing units, for the provision of at least 1,000 additional units in the city. You know, I think what was said earlier is absolutely right, and I endorse it. We have got a broken model. Our social housing model is broken, and we would like to remedy that. I want to go out and have an intelligent conversation with the community on it. What I see these 2 points that have been added doing is not proposing intelligent conversation with the community, but proposes a leading conversation with the community, or at worst, in my opinion, a predetermined conversation with the community. So we can look at it through a lens of saying that this is about providing, you know, warm, clean houses for people and everything like that. But I think there's a more important lens which I think needs to be put over absolutely everything that comes in front of us as a council if we're to be good governors of a city. And that's the fact that what may be more important than having a warm, dry house to live in is that we have a city to live in that isn't bankrupt. So I think that it's dangerous when we start changing the meanings of the objectives here, because I think option 20, which is the sale of social housing, is a valid question to ask the community. We're cognisant that that could potentially provide $343 million, close to $350 million. Hey, newsflash, guys, that's still 200 million short of what we need, even if we did that. So I think that it needs to be considered, and that's why I'm supporting the amendment here.
I've got Phil, then Yanni.
Look, I think there's no significant or let alone major change that I can see between with what is on our desk now compared with this morning, and like there's no way this is predetermined. The options for people to give feedback are absolutely clear within the statement of proposal, and like I'm sure that perfectly ordinary, intelligent people will be able to see it that way. I want to say too that I actually really applaud the statement of proposal that we've come up with, and I applaud the work that Vicky Buck and the staff have done. It does leave the options open. It actually is a way about how we can do our social housing, rather than we can't do and we'll sell it and let someone else do it all better. The whole approach of being able to lease our land to an entity and for us to retain a stake in it, I think is commendable given the financial situation of our social housing. As Councillor Livingston has referred to, our social housing is actually a legacy of Christchurch City. We do not have to emulate Auckland. We can in fact fix our whole social, not just social but affordable housing problem, which is huge. And I'd like to make sure that in fact we all support this as being a way forward to start to do that. Thank you.
Yanni?